Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Studying Law Around the World. And today I'll have the opportunity to interview Fadi Khalil, who is speaking about studying law in Egypt and also working with international law. So thank you very much for joining us today. It is a great honor to host you at the podcast. And to start our conversation, would you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes, of course. But first, thank you very much, Claudio, for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to your audience. So about introducing myself, I'm North Africa's expert member of the working group on death penalty, extrajudicial summary or arbitrary killings, and enforced disappearance in Africa. This is a working group that is located in the African Commission on Human Rights, African Commission on Human and People's Rights of the African Union. I'm also a legal assistant to the current Egyptian member in the United Nations International Law Commission. His name is Ambassador Ahmed Fadi Khalil. And I'm also a fellow and a content contributor at the Center for International Law Research and Policy. It's one of the top research centers in international criminal law, humanitarian law, and human rights law. And my work there is just various. Yeah, so this is everything about me.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for your willingness and for your time to joining us today. And normally the podcast kind of goes in two sections, right? So normally the first few questions are just standardized. So I try to ask that for everybody so that our listeners can have like a really good idea of how law school works in most countries. And then after that, we ask a little bit of more like on a personal note or more of in your area of work. But just to start with our first question, could you tell us a little bit about law school in Egypt? That's where you studied, right? So how is law school, like how long it is? Is it an undergraduate degree?
Yes, I studied my undergrad in Egypt. During the bachelor's, you have 4 years of study. And then you have the chance to do a master's, which is composed of 2 diplomas of higher studies. And then you can do the PhD. So I'll take you through every stage of these. So during the bachelor's, it's 4 years, as I said. You have mandatory modules to study, so nothing is elective. And you just study all the law, like all the Egyptian law, plus Islamic Sharia as well, because of the Islamic perspective that Egypt has and dimension, of course. After you graduate from the bachelor's, this is the time where you can, or when you can specialize. So if you wish to have, or if you wish to obtain a master's degree, you will have to study 2 diplomas of higher studies. One of them should be in public or private law, so in the general sense. And the second one could be in any specialized diploma, like international law, commercial law, civil law, criminal law, etc. And the master's that you obtain, in its title, it's written Master of Laws. So no specialization is put in the title. However, in your CV, you can explain that you have studied a diploma in public law, for instance, and a diploma in international law. Therefore, you consider your specialization as a master's in international law. Then during the PhD, of course, I forgot to mention that one diploma of higher studies takes 1 year on full-time basis. There is no option of doing it on part-time basis. Okay, moving to the third stage, which is PhD. It takes minimum 4 years, up to 7 years. And in it, you have to publish 2 articles And if successful, you can move on to writing your dissertation. So we don't have modules in the PhD, to study and to be examined in them. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything about studying law in Egypt.
Fantastic. That's very nice. Yeah, thanks for also clarifying about the courses being mandatory and like everybody studying the same subjects. That's always something that I find interesting when comparing. And I'm as you explained well, I believe that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, perhaps one thing I forgot to mention is that during studying your diplomas or any diploma, you have elective modules to choose from. So you have like three or four, I think four mandatory modules to study, and you have one elective module to study. In addition to writing research, we do not call it a thesis nor dissertation. It's just a research. Yeah, so that's that's everything.
Got it. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I guess for what I've gathered for most of the interviews I've done, most of the undergraduate degrees in law around the world, they mostly have mostly mandatory courses, and that does make sense, right? We want everybody to have an idea, a general idea of all the law. So it makes sense that you specialize as you move on to your master's, diplomas, PhD, etc. So that's very interesting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, if you allow me to ask a little bit about your personal experience, could you share with our listeners a little bit about how you decided to study law?
Yes. Actually, this traces back to my early childhood. Yeah. At that time, I had a problem, or actually, my family said that I have a problem in determining what's right and what's wrong. So yeah, so I was taught, like in my family, of course, what's right and what's wrong. I received some good teachings at church about that, but always in practice, I was seen by my family members, of course, my elder family members, as one who does not know the difference between right and wrong. And whenever I debated with them this alleged fact, they always said, okay, you misunderstand our teachings, or either you're a bad guy, just, just a bad guy. Having said that, at one time, I think I was in grade 4 at that time, I met with an elder family member with whom I had the chance to know about the future of my education after I finish secondary school. You know, as a child in grade 4, I know nothing but school. I don't know what's coming or what will be coming ahead. So he started to explain to me that there are universities and every university has faculties, and he started to give me some examples about what every faculty does. So among the examples he gave me was the Faculty of Law. So I was, attracted to that name, and I started asking more questions about it. So like, tell me, what exactly do I learn in this faculty? So he started saying, you know what's right and what's wrong in life in general. Since in the Faculty of Law we study the law governing all the disciplines, So at that time I said, wow, then after I finish secondary school, I will join the Faculty of Law. So that was a decision that I made when I was in grade 4. Yeah. And I did that. I joined the Faculty of Law, of course, in my country in 2007. And when I got there, I found that we have 11 branches of law. And I found some branches to be conflicting with the others. So I was put in a question where, okay, so we have several right things and we have several wrong things. So what is the absolute right? Which right supersedes over the other? And here I started to dig into the 11 branches. And from my research, I found that international law supersedes over all the other branches of law. So international law has the absolute right, or it has the right that supersedes over the other rights or correct notions. And from that time, I decided to specialize in international law. And perhaps I would explain this in the later as we go on. Yeah, so I hope this answers your question.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I never got to hear something as nice as that, just
Yeah.
deciding very early in life and just getting this opportunity and then choosing the area of law you want to specialize on based on that. That's fantastic. Wow, thank you so much for sharing. That's
Yeah,
really draws a lot of inspiration.
It's my pleasure. And there's also one thing that I forgot to mention. When I was a child, I always debated with my family about whether I was right or wrong, So this developed and then improved my lawyering skills, how to present, how to listen, how to respond, how to argue, etc. So yeah, I'm a lawyer since childhood, actually. Yeah.
Wow, that's really incredible. And going on about becoming a lawyer in this process, can you tell us a little bit about how does licensing or how does becoming a lawyer, registered lawyer, works in Egypt? Is there a bar exam? What are the requirements for somebody to become a lawyer?
Yes, sure. Okay, so once you finish your bachelor's degree, you can register at the Egyptian bar as a district attorney, and you stay as such for 2 years, and then after 3 years, you become a first instance attorney. So when you register as a district attorney, you cannot move to the next stage unless you complete 2 years as a district attorney and then complete another 3 years to become a first instance attorney. However, if you got an LLM during that phase, you can directly register as a first instance attorney. So you don't need to pass by the first stage, which is district attorney. Okay, so then after you become a first instance attorney, you have to spend 5 years in order to become an appeal attorney. And also an appeal attorney is eligible to plead before the Council of State, which is one of the administrative tribunals in the civil law system, since Egypt is a civil law system. And also an appeal attorney has the right to plead before all the other administrative courts. Okay, so now, yeah. So then the next stage is that you become a cassation attorney, and you achieve this degree when you complete 10 years as an appeal attorney. And when you become a cassation attorney, you also have the right to plead before the High Constitutional Court and the High Administrative Court. And this differentiates between a cassation attorney and an appeal attorney in the point that an appeal attorney can only plead before normal administrative courts plus the Council of State, but a cassation attorney can also appeal before the High Administrative Court. Of course, in addition to the High Constitutional Court. Having said all that, if you have a PhD, you can directly become a cassation attorney, regardless of where you are, regardless whether you're an appeal attorney or a first instance attorney. If you have a PhD, you can just move forward directly to to becoming a cassation attorney. So as you can see, it's all about experience. The more you have experience, I mean professional experience, and whether you have the relevant academic experience, you can just move to the second phase. We don't have exams at any phase to pass by or to succeed in. Yeah, and perhaps this makes it easier for Egyptians to become lawyers than for other nationalities to become lawyers in their home countries. Yeah.
Wow, but that's very, very interesting for sure. Also, would you happen to be aware if there is any restriction to only nationals can be lawyers, or if you are somebody from another country who moves into Egypt and is like has a permit to live there and also has studied law in Egypt, could you become a lawyer if you're a foreign national? And I'm sorry, this was kind of an unexpected question.
Yeah. I haven't passed by this point in my career, but most probably no. Most probably you have to be an Egyptian citizen. Yeah. But I can check and then you can return back to your audience and tell them. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. So you mentioned that when you were studying, you end up deciding on international law because it was really a branch that kind of supersedes everything else. Can you tell us a little bit more about this specialization of yours in international law, and maybe if you could mention some other aspects of your career so far in this area?
Yeah, sure. So in the first year of my bachelor's degree, I decided that it is international law that I will follow and specialize in. So I started doing many extracurricular activities in my university and other universities, specifically those known as MUNs, or Models of United Nations. So I've always simulated the International Court of Justice, which is, of course, the main and highest body in international law. So I acted as a judge, as an advocate, as the president of the court. Yeah. And that was in 10 simulations, in Egypt, in the Netherlands, and the UK. Also, whenever I found that there was a seminar in my university or another university about a topic on international law, I've always attended this seminar. Also, I used to attend PhD defense sessions, just to learn from the elder persons. In the end, I'm a bachelor degree student. So what about the PhD students? What do they say? How do they think? And also, what do the professors evaluating this PhD candidate say at this high stage? Also, I attended lectures in the Egyptian Society of International Law. And this kind of society is normally or frequently found in different countries. I mean, every country has its own National Society of International Law. And they actually provide good lectures. So that was my life during my bachelor's degree. When I graduated, that was in 2011. I studied a diploma in international law, a diploma of higher studies. So with that, I had half masters. And in parallel, I did a 3-month internship at UN Women, which is the United Nations entity on women. Yeah. And also in the same year, I volunteered for the Egyptian Red Crescent Society. Yeah, so it was very intense. It was a very intensive year, and it was one of my best years ever. So all that brought to me my first job as a refugee status determination eligibility officer at UNHCR, or the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in its regional office in Cairo, Egypt. And simply my role there was to decide whether asylum seekers should be given refugee status, whether they meet the criteria of the refugee definition under UNHCR's mandate. Then I did my LLM in International Law at the University of Nottingham. And I had the privilege to work on a part-time basis as one of the research assistants to the head of the School of Law. Then I interned for 6 months, at the Special Tribunal for Lebanon in The Hague. It's a tribunal that was set by the UN Security Council to trial the persons who are alleged to have killed Rafiq al-Hariri, the former Prime Minister of Lebanon. Then I managed to act or to work as a legal consultant to one of the senior lawyers in this tribunal after I finished my internship, of course. And I'm still in this position until now. Then I was asked by the Egyptian Red Crescent to act as its expert on international law for a short-term project. And it was just by appointment, so I haven't passed by an interview or anything. It was just a call. And, after that, I managed to become the legal assistant of the former Egyptian member at the United Nations International Law Commission. His name is Ambassador Dr. Hussein Hassouna. He's very well known there for being acted as a member for like 11 years or so. And then I joined the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. It's an advisory body to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. And it's normally composed of retired ambassadors and other senior officials or politicians or economic professionals in Egypt. So simply, it is composed of people who are senior experts in their field, so that they can give the correct advice to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And of course, they give this advice when they meet and discuss specific topics that are important to the foreign policy of Egypt. And these meetings are usually held like monthly or every 3 months, 6 months, depending on several things. Then I had some like minor part-time jobs, but the significant job that I had afterwards was working as a senior researcher at Egypt Supreme Standing Committee for Human Rights. It's simply the main body in Egypt that is responsible for enhancing human rights in the country, in all aspects, legislative, monitoring and evaluation, capacity building, etc. And after I left the committee, I returned back to my I returned back to my current positions that I mentioned in the beginning, because it was not possible to carry them out in parallel to my duties in the committee because of conflict of interest. So that's pretty much everything about my career. As far as I can remember, because as far as I can remember, because it has been 15 years now, or even more. So yeah.
That's incredible. Well, I was very, very happy to listen to the different possibilities you had, and going from your LLM studies, having several opportunities in the UN, And really, it was incredible to hear about your really high interest shown from the beginning of your career, right? Going to the simulations, to the models during school, and then going to all the lectures after. So definitely, that shows a lot about how much you were really interested in the area. And I guess
Yeah.
now to kind of wrap up this interview, would you happen to have some tips for students who would wish to work in this area and who are preparing to work in international law? What are some of the suggestions maybe that you would tell them, or maybe even advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah. So in addition to what they may learn from my trip, as I learned from the trip of others, um, I would say that they would, or they have to focus on in like on the interdisciplinary approach. That's to say that it is not enough for them to learn law very well, but it's also useful to learn other disciplines like politics, economics, management, sociology, strategic studies. These are all very important nowadays to have a good career in international law. And when speaking about international law, it's even better that uh, they get they familiarize themselves with its two branches. Like in international law, we have two branches. The first is international economic law. That's to say international commercial law, business law, investment, oil and gas, etc. And we have the other branch, which is my specialization, which actually doesn't have a name. It's just said it is just called public international law or general international law, but this is not accurate. So I tend to name it as international political law or political international law because it is the international law governing political relations, contrary to international economic law governing economic relations. So it's always best to combine knowledge from both branches and not to stick only in one branch. Of course, in addition to having good knowledge in domestic law, like the domestic law of their country, of course, in addition to the other disciplines that I mentioned. Of course, it is very difficult for one to have like good knowledge in all these disciplines, but the more you have knowledge in one or more of these disciplines, the better you are situated in your career endeavors. This is one thing. Another thing is my advice. Like my second advice is to always read books, articles, and also to participate in student activities as much as possible, especially the ones mostly relevant to the discipline that you want to learn about. So for instance, speaking about MUNs or models of United Nations, these activities do not only provide simulations for the International Court of Justice, but you can simulate the UN Security Council if you want to learn about politics. You can simulate the General Assembly if you want to learn about the socio-economic aspects of the international relations. Also, there are student activities simulating the national courts of the country you are in, like the normal criminal court, the ordinary criminal court or the ordinary civil court, etc. Administrative courts, So here the idea is to practice. So yeah, I spoke about reading in theory or learning in theory, and now I'm talking about practicing, just like the elder people do. Yeah. Also, it's very important to, of course, at the suitable time, to carry or to carry out internships and volunteering in the entities that you see relevant and that you see that they will give you the experience you need in terms of quantity and quality. So in my field of international law, the best entities are usually for fresh graduates are NGOs working on humanitarian affairs, development issues, charity issues. Also, it is possible to join a research center or institute in your country which works on topics that are relevant to you. Also, and perhaps this comes later, you can then apply to work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of your country. You can also apply to work as a TA, teaching assistant, in one of the universities in your country. And this is normally possible at private universities, because in Egypt, you only have the right to work as a TA if you were top ranked in your bachelor's and then you got appointed as such in your university at that time. So yeah, the better chance that everyone has is to work as TA in private universities.
Wow, that's fantastic. Those are really good suggestions for anybody who's thinking about a career in the area. I really appreciate you kind of thinking them through as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, I don't want my statements to be interpreted, domestically only. I always advise fresh graduates to think internationally, so you can do all these good things abroad as well. So just don't limit yourself by any things that you are told. The more and the diverse you do, the more and better you get chances in your career.
That's incredible. Well,
yeah.
Dr. Fadi, thank you so much for the privilege of getting this opportunity to hear from you. I'm sure our listeners are just as excited, and thanks a lot once again for your willingness to join us today for the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claudio. It has been a real pleasure, and I hope your audience were satisfied and happy. And I remain in touch with any one of them, and you, of course. Should you or they have any questions or clarifications, I'm available on Facebook, email, and LinkedIn. Yeah, and I can send you my whatever details you need after the podcast, so that we can facilitate interaction if required by anyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.